Alright, so the time has finally come. It's time for the first PC build of 2021. And I'm quite excited for this one because it's going to be a micro ATX case, but it's going to look super good. It might be the best looking one I've done. Now there's no particular budget right now because PC part prices are just crazy. They're fluctuating all the time, especially graphics cards. They're just unavailable and they're super expensive. So I just want to warn you guys that to build a PC right now, the market might not be the best. With that said, let's go over the parts really quickly because this video might take a while. So for the motherboard, we have the Asus Prime B450M A2 micro ATX motherboard for Ryzen processors. We have the Ryzen 5 1600. Now I used this processor for my previous build and I still find that it's the best bang for your buck at the moment. It's 150 bucks, so it did go up a little bit in comparison to last PC build, but it's still definitely good and it should be more than enough for gaming. And of course for really anything else you want to use it for. We have 16 gigs of RAM from PNY. We have a GTX 1650. May not be the best card, but it's the one that I had available near me and the one that wasn't crazily overpriced. We have a 450 watt power supply from Corsair, a 128 gig SSD from PNY, which is a part that I've had in pretty much every PC build. It's $20 for an SSD. That alone will boost your PC's speed, loading speed and all that stuff. We have a 1TB hard drive from Western Digital. That's pretty standard stuff. For the CPU cooler, we will use the Deepcool Gamax GTE V2, which I'm super excited for. It's gonna look really good inside of this case. For the fans, we have a 5-pack. It's the Deepcool RF120. They'll fill up all the fan slots inside of the case perfectly. We have an LED RGB strip also from Deepcool. This is one I've had in almost all the PCs I've built as well. I have it on my main computer right here. I have two of them actually. And all of that is going to go inside the Deepcool Macube 110. Now this is the white model of the Macube 110. I believe it's also available in black if you have darker components. However, I'm going for a white build with black components inside and some lighting to spice it up a bit. I believe it's going to look good, but we'll see how it turns out. And of course, we'll be running Windows 10. Now in previous build, I used to just speed up the entire building process, but I've gotten many requests from people wanting me to do sort of a tutorial. Now I'm not going to do a step-by-step guide because that's just going to take days to record and then it's going to be like a full hour video and I don't want that, at least not now. I will, however, be more detailed with what I'm doing. I won't speed up the entire thing, but I'll explain what I'm doing. That way, maybe if you're a first-time builder, you may get a little bit more insight of what is to be done with each part if you're not completely sure. Alright, I believe that's it for the intro. Now let's get building. Please make sure to leave a like and a comment down below and let me know how I can improve these sort of videos because I plan on making a lot of PC builds this year. Alright, let's get on with it. So first we're going to start with the motherboard. We're going to take it out of the package. Keep the IO shield with you. You don't want to lose it and don't forget about it either. We're going to use it in a little bit. You should also have a few SATA cables for hard drives and stuff. We're going to use these in a little bit as well. There's the motherboard, just place it on top of the box and you're ready for step 2. For the meantime, you could set your motherboard aside and get your processor. If you're going to use the cooler that comes with the processor, you might want to take that out as well. I'll be using a different one, so I will skip this step. So with AMD Ryzen processors, they have the pins on the back, so even with Intel processors, it doesn't matter. You don't want to touch the back of it. Both the motherboard and the processor, Intel or AMD, they have little triangles on the corner. Now on the motherboard, I'll try to show a picture here. There's a triangle on one of the corners that you could see that is a little bit different than the ones on the other corners. And also on the processor, there's a triangle on the corner that's different than the rest. So you just want to line those up and you want to let the processor just sit into place. You don't have to push it down or anything. It'll sit on its own and then give it a little wiggle just to make sure that it's in place. You don't have to put any force or anything once again, and then you just pull down the latch, lock it into place, and that's it for the processor. Now next up, we're going to install the RAM. So these are the RAM modules, the RAM slots, I should say. And as you can see right there, it says A1, A2, B1, B2. If you only have 2 RAM slots like I do, then you want to put them where the asterisks are. More often than not, it's going to be in slots 2 and 4. In this case, they're grayed out. It's what the motherboard prefers. If you have 4 slots, then just populate all of them. It's no big deal. If you only have 2 slots, then once again, just populate both slots. Not all motherboards have that little indicator there. You might want to look at your manual, but like I said, more often than not, it'll be on slots 2 and 4. So that's where we're going to install our modules. Before we get started, just make sure you pull the latch here. Most motherboards only have it on one side, but just in case, make sure they're not on this side either. So taking a look at your RAM stick right here, it's out of the box. You see this little gap right here. and then you look at the slot and you see that there's a little notch in the middle. So you simply just want to line them up. You could put it inside the RAM slot and not snap it into place, not yet, and make sure that it lines up correctly. If it does, then you're all set to go. You can put it in completely and just snap it into place. It should have a little bit of click, that's normal. And then do the other one just exactly the same way. There we go. If you think that you didn't install them correctly, in this case one of my latches did not close down all the way, so you just simply take them off and you could reinstall them. So at this point, if you're going to use the standard cooler that comes with the processor, I would install it now. But first, before you do that, you want to just remove these things that are on the motherboard. I don't know why they're here. You just unscrew them with a screwdriver and just take them out. I won't be installing my cooler just yet. I'll be doing that a little bit later. Now, I like to get the easy stuff out of the way, so we're going to grab our case, take off the back panel, and we're just going to mount the hard drive and the SSD to get it ready for the next steps when we plug everything all in. Also, when you open up your case for the first time, in the back you should see the cables bunched up into a little baggie here. Inside there should be a bag with some screws. Make sure to get that. So in this little package we got a bunch of zip ties, we got a manual, and we got screws to mount the motherboard, to mount the power supply, and to mount hard drives and SSDs onto the hard drive cage. Do not lose those. Right now I have the case on its side. This is the bottom part, and every case is the same, so this may not apply to yours. But to install the hard drive and the SSD with much more ease, because it could be a little tricky getting it in here, especially if you have to screw something in, look down below, because one thing I like about the Deepcool MaCube 110 is that these two screws here, if you undo them, you could just slide out the hard drive cage. This thing right here, and that would make it so much easier to install hard drives and SSDs. You also get space for an SSD right here and up here. So Deepcool really thought about the user, and they tried to make it simple for them, which is a definite plus. Okay, once you're done mounting the hard drive into the bracket, you just simply slide it in the way you found it and tie up the two screws once again. Now the MaCube 110 comes with its own fan, but I will be uninstalling it and installing my own fans, which coincidentally also come from Deepcool. But before we get into any of that, now that we've opened the case, you want to get your IO shield, and before you forget to do this, put it in this open spot right here. It's really common for people to forget it. I've forgotten it once in the past, and trust me, you just want to get done with it now. It's really easy. Now you just want to make sure that it all snaps, because you want to make sure that stays in place. And be careful with the little spiky ends, they could cut you. Take note of the holes around the motherboard. So there's one there, there's another one there, another one here. There should be about 8 or 9. And you use those to line it up with the case. The case should have some standoffs. You just line them up, and then with the case's included screws, you screw down the motherboard into the case. So remember the holes that were on the motherboard. If you look at the case, the inside of it should have some standoffs. Now the motherboard had 8 holes, and as you can see, there's 1 there, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now you won't be using all of them because once again there's only 8 on the motherboard. So when you're installing it, you just want to make sure they line up and screw in the screws that come included with the case. Alright, now I removed the extra one that was right down there in the middle of your screen, and now we have 8. Now, one of the things I should have probably done at the beginning before installing the motherboard is sort of line up where the card's going to be. You want to see which one of these gates, I don't know what you call them, I'm calling them gates, which one of these you want to take off to allow the ports to be accessible through the back. So in my case, since my graphics card only has 1 row of ports, and I lined it up already, looks like the second is the one I will need to remove. In this particular case, this screw holds everything together. So if you undo it, you can remove this little metal piece. And the reason why you want to identify which one you need to take out and take it out before you install the motherboard is because you kind of have to break it out. If you try to take this out when the motherboard is installed, you run the risk of damaging it, or you'll surely scratch it. But luckily for me, just like that, just have to wiggle it a little bit and it comes right off. But just to be safe, you should really be doing that step before you install the motherboard. Now when installing the motherboard, make sure that you line it up correctly with your IO shield. You place it down and then slide it gently around the place. Alright, once it's in place, and you could tell when it's in place because the ports are flush, they're inside of the IO shield, and they're popping out in the back just a little bit, just enough. And then if you look through the holes here, you could see that all of the holes on the motherboard line up with the standoffs on the case. And now you're all ready to screw in the little screws. Now I also want to point out the type of screws. Now these come with your case, and normally you get like 10 of them. So I only need 8 for this motherboard. Just make sure that it's the correct one. Your manual should have the names of all the screws and what they're for, but in case it doesn't, normally the ones that go on the motherboard are a little bit round at the top there. So just keep that in mind. And when screwing them in, you want to start, you can start anywhere, but just make sure that you do it in a crisscross pattern. So if you start up here, you want to do the next one down here. Tackle every corner. Don't tighten it all the way either. You just want to make sure they're tight enough to where they don't move, but they're still a little bit loose, so you could install the other ones without a problem. Once you have all 8 inside, or 9 depending on your motherboard, you can just tighten all of them once again in the crisscross pattern. Now don't tighten it too much because it could bend the motherboard and it could cause problems in the long run. So you want to tighten it just enough to where it stops spinning, and that's it. They should not come loose. So this is arguably the most annoying part of the build. It involves the cables that come from the case, from the front input output. They're the ones that are labeled HDD LED, power switch, and a reset switch, and also the USB 3 and the audio connectors. And like I showed you before, they go into the F panel right here. The USB one is easy because it goes inside the one that has a rectangle over it. Now this one is normally down here, but it could also be up here next to the power connector. And normally the HD audio will be towards the left, somewhere over here. If you're unsure on which one it is, like for this one, you could count how many holes are in the connector and then count how many pins are over here. Only one will match, but you could also read the label or consult your motherboard's manual. HDD LED goes on the bottom left. Now please don't think I'm a pro because I am definitely not. Reset switch goes on the bottom, right next to the hard drive LED. And power switch goes above the reset switch right up here. Now in this case, the front two, I believe, just stay blank because there's nothing that goes into them. No cable, there's no power LED. So I think we're done for the F panel. Okay, so I'm editing the first half of the video and I made a big mistake. So I put that connector above. It's really supposed to go in the pins right here. This is for a speaker if you have one. So move this down to the bottom level. As you can see, the first time I had it up here, but that's incorrect. It's down below. Now I also recommend just routing the cable, or at least have an idea of how you want to route them. Now that my front F panel motherboard connectors are in, I just put some zip ties in there. They're not completely tightened. There's a good chance that I'll cut them and just redo it, but I just have an idea of how I want to route those cables. That's the other part that could get a little frustrating, so you want to make it as easy as possible. Alright, so onward we go. Now you want to get your power supply. Now that's the next step in this build. So with your power supply, you'll get a power cord. Just set this aside for now. And your power supply with all the cables. That's going to be a mess. Oh, and this power supply actually comes with its own screws. So it looks like we don't need the ones that come with the case. Really quickly, I just want to say, take note of which side the fan is on and notice the words. Now, not all of them are like this, but the fan normally goes on the bottom and have the label pointing upward. This may still be upside down, but this side will be right side up. Keep that in mind. Once again, this may be upside down, but the fan should be facing down. Now the installation isn't always the same, but more often than not, you can just squeeze it through in here, through the side, and install it this way. Alright, now just grab your screws. You might want to hold it in place from the back, but just make sure that they line up. There's a hole up here, one down here, and then in these two corners. So same as before, you just want to do in a crisscross pattern. If you start with the top right, you want to follow it with the bottom left just to apply even pressure. That rule pretty much goes for really anything computer related. And then at the end, just tighten it once it's in place. So next up, you want to undo whatever twisty is around the cable and just set them loose so you could figure out which ones you need and which ones you want to set aside. We won't be using all of them. So this part purely depends on what components you're installing on your computer, but in most cases you'll need this one. Sometimes it's labeled on the side. So CPU, this is going to be connected to the top left of the motherboard. Will be connected to the graphics card. Now not all graphics cards go plugged in. Some low powered one may not need this cable, but in this case mine does. So we're gonna set that one aside as well. This is the main power connector. Every motherboard will need this one, and it's the easiest one to identify. It's just the one with the 24 pins. And then of course for your hard drives, you want the SATA connectors. The good thing about these is that in a little piece of cable you have two of them, and I will need two of them because I have an SSD and a hard drive. So these are the cables that we're going to need, and we have a few other ones that we're going to set aside. These we don't need, so I'm just going to tuck them in to the bottom of the case and just hide them there. And next, all this depends on you and how you want to route your cables, or the method in which you do this. At this point, I like to just route the cables that I'm going to use over these cutouts. That way I just know which cable is going where. And also the way you route them is completely up to you. And like I said, the extra cables that come from your power supply that you're not going to use, you just tie them up and just tuck them in there. You can hide them and never see them again. So as you can see, the way I decided to route my cables, this is the CPU cable that goes on the top left. This is the main power connector, and then this is the graphics card cable that I routed through the bottom. And now I'm going to connect both power cables. The graphics card cable could wait until after I install the graphics card, of course. Now just to show you guys where everything is going, this CPU cable, the power cable, there's the port for it on the top left, right under the screw, and then the 24-pin power connector should always be on the right side. Alright, and for both, you just want to make sure that they're in all the way. So just give them a little wiggle, but don't apply too much pressure. You don't want to damage the motherboard. And once again, I'll leave the cable managing up to you. I'll be managing the two power connectors right now, just to keep it as simple as possible. Alright, so I routed most of my cables now. I still need the fans, and I still need the graphics card cable, and the SATA cable that we saved before. It has two right here. I will be using both of them. And as you can see, I decided to mount my SSD up here, and my hard drive is down here in the cage. So I will be connecting both of them now with the SATA power connectors. Now I hope at this point you haven't forgotten about your SATA cables that came with the motherboard. You want to take those out of the packaging. Mine came with two, which is normally the amount that it comes with, and we're using two drives, so this is perfect. So now with those SATA cables, you want to route it from the SSD up here, or wherever you mounted it, and the hard drive down here to the motherboard, which has the SATA connectors, which has the connectors in this motherboard on the bottom right. So in my motherboard, there's two SATA connectors right here. Those are the ones I want to use because the cables are already here, and there's a cutout right below. So I will be taking the SATA cables, connecting them here, routing them down, and then up to the hard drives. That's a plan. Both SATA connectors are plugged in, and as you can see, it was a perfect case for that angled one right there. There we go. There's a little lock mechanism right there. If you want to unplug it, you need to push that down and pull it. So in this case, if you installed the CPU cooler that comes with your CPU before, then you could completely disregard this. I'll be installing the Deepcool Gamax GTE V2. I'll just skip ahead because not all coolers are the same, and there's a good chance that you'll have a different cooler. But I do want you to take note of the fan connectors. So there's a channel fan 2 right there, and the CPU fan, and there should also be another one right here, channel fan 1. So those are three places where you could connect fans. The white header up here is for RGB. So in case your motherboard is compatible with LED features, your motherboard will have this. If it's not compatible with that, then it'll just not be here at all. And you can tell what it is because it says RGB header right there. All right, so my cooler is now in place. Now it's time for the finishing moves. So if you have fans that you need to install, I think now is a good time to install them. I'll be installing 5 of the RF120Ms from Deepcool, and then after the fans, that's when we install the graphics card just to finish it off. Alright, so I have all my fans in, the coolers in, cables are managed for the most part, and now the final physical step, because there's still another step we have to do, but it's when the computer's on. So the final physical step is to install the graphics card. Now this is the 1650 Super. It's pretty small, it should fit in this case no problem. These cases typically could fit in the hole. The way we install it, once again, that slot right there, this long one, that's where we will be plugging in this piece. Once again, you want to make sure that latch is open. Line up the graphics card. You should hear some sort of a click. There we go. So in here the case has holes so you could screw in the graphics card. Now you just want to make sure it's straight, line it up with a hole, and you should have extra screws from the ones that came with the case. So I'll be using one of those. And last but not least, the cable we've left dangling this entire time is gonna go plugged in right there. The cable has 6 pins and then it has 2 extra ones. Some graphics cards need all 8. In this case, this one only has space for 6. So we'll use the 6. This could be left on the side, it's not going anywhere. This one should also click when you push it in. And this is basically all done. I would have preferred to get a much bigger graphics card because this one just looks too small and it doesn't hide the cables right there. But I still think it looks good. Also, if you use zip ties, please don't forget to cut the ends of them just so you won't have anything interfering with the cables or the back of the motherboard. But other than that, you're pretty much done and you could close the PC now. And of course, you also don't want to forget your nice sticker. There we go. So at this point, your PC's all ready to go, it powers on, cables are managed, and everything works fine. So now you have to install Windows 10. Now there's a way to put Windows 10 into a USB flash drive and then plug it into the computer and install it that way. I'm not going to show how you do that in this video, but I will leave a link below to a good video that I found. So you might want to check it out so you could just do this yourself. It's really simple. But however, I will show you what happens after you plug in the USB to your computer and you power it on. Alright, so first of all, you want to plug in your USB before powering on. Alright, so once your computer boots, sometimes it automatically does it, but just in case it doesn't, you have some little bit of information from your computer. Press delete and function 2, F2, just like it says in the bottom right there, and it should take you to the UEFI BIOS. Here we are, we're in the UEFI BIOS. So at this point we have the 2 hard drives plugged in, the PNY, the 120GB SSD, and the 1TB Western Digital Blue hard drive. And we also have PNY flash drive, 16 gigs USB 2.0. And at this moment, that's the one we want to use because that's the one that has Windows 10. So we just click and drag it. It should be at the bottom. You want to drag it to the top and then you select save and exit. Because this is the first time we're doing this, this all might take a while. All right, so now it's rebooting and it should instantly go into Windows 10, but from the flash drive. And because my flash drive is just USB 2.0, it might be a little bit slower. All right, so here you select your language, English, type of keyboard, USA, next. Install now. All right, so like it says there, the setup is starting. So if you've already bought Windows 10, if you've bought a key, put it in here. I have one, so I'm just gonna put it in real quick. If you don't have a key, then you just select I don't have a product key. You don't have to activate it now. You actually don't have to activate it at all if you don't want to, but it just enables a few features. I bought it for $25 on the G2A website. I'll leave a link down below. All right, so once you've put in the key, you click next. Just wait a little bit. Alright, you have to accept the license terms, upgrade and install Windows, or install Windows only. This is a fresh PC, so we're just gonna install Windows only. So this is important. There's a number of things you could do with this, but we're just gonna keep it as simple as possible, and we're gonna select drive 1. Keep in mind that the SSD we're using is 128 gigs, which in computer terms, it's not exactly 128 gigs. In this case, it's 111 gigs. You want to select your fastest drive, the SSD, as long as you have enough space, but select your fastest drive because it's totally worth it. That's like the sole reason why we're using an SSD. If you select your 1TB hard drive to install Windows, it's going to be much slower. Select the SSD, click next. Okay. Once again, this is just in its simplest form. You could do a load of things with partitions and all that stuff. And now we wait. So this process might take a few minutes to like half an hour, depends on your system and your drives. All right, that little process has finished now, and now I think it's gonna reboot. And on this reboot, we don't have to go into the BIOS or anything like that. Just let it do what it's gonna do. Once again, this may take a little bit. It's rebooting once again. That's perfectly normal. Okay, and now we're gonna select our region, USA. The keyboard layout, skip. Right now I'm not connected to the internet, so I will connect with a limited setup. You could connect to the internet if you want. I'm just not connected right now. I don't have a cable running through it. So I'm just gonna name this PC 1000. All right. No, I don't want to select that. No, I don't want the digital assistant. You can turn on or turn off any of these that you like. I will just turn them all off. Alright, and now it's setting it up. Once again, this may take a little bit. Alright, and now we're in our home page. So Windows is pretty much installed. So right now it looks a little bit off because we haven't installed the drivers. That's pretty simple, just a quick Google search and you'll find the right one. And the time is also incorrect because we're not connected to the internet. So if you are connected to the internet, then you should be fine in terms of time and date. Alright, so that pretty much does it for the PC build of 2021.